Okay, this is part 2 of Don K. Preston's amazing admissions in stating the death of 1 Corinthians 15 is physical death. Now, you need to watch this video if you're at all familiar with covenant eschatology, the corporate body view of full preterism, and Don K. Preston. As I had this snapshot and released this video showing the implications of his admissions, and everyone was shocked. This was about 2 years ago. Everyone was shocked. Sam Frost, Michael Eckerson, Lance Connolly, Jeff Cunahan, as you can see in the comments below. As this is a fatal admission for Don. I think he was under distress or duress when I asked him the question. But there's a snapshot, and I get into the text. Especially verse 20, where he admits asleep, which is equated to the dead who would be raised after the first fruits of Christ. Asleep, dead. And you follow that through to verse 23. It's the same. It's one section, 20 through 28. And if the last enemy to be destroyed is death, verse 26, well, when was physical death, verse 20, destroyed in AD 70? Now, right now, we're going to go to some recent stuff that has been the last couple days on Facebook here, on the group Full Preterism, a thing of the past. As we're going to document how Don refuses, he utterly refuses. You don't have to take my word for it. We're going to go through all of this very briefly. But he refuses to confirm what he admitted in the past. Now, let's see here. Sorry, I'm a little shaky with the camera. I'm trying to scroll up. Okay, this was originally a post by Don's nephew, Mark Glenn. And then, let's see what we have here. I ask him, what does fallen asleep mean in 1 Corinthians 6, 20 and 52? It should be 51. Spiritual or physical biological death. Of course, Mark Glenn never answers anything. And so I say, Uncle Don, let's see if we can get all this up here. As this is amazing. Don is back-peddling. He's back-peddling. And he's giving red herrings. He's focusing in on verse 51. They will not all sleep. That means the parousia had to be in the first century. No, he's not dealing with or reaffirming what we're asking him, what I'm asking him. Do you still believe that asleep means physical, biological death? In verse 6, verse 18, 20, and 51, especially verse 20. And so, you can see what I say there to Don. Uncle Don K. Preston admitted that asleep, quote unquote, in 1 Corinthians 15, 6, 20, and 51 is physical, biological death. If verse 20 is biological death, according to Don, then the last enemy, quote unquote, death, of verse 26 is physical, biological death. Game over. I have the screenshot of him admitting asleep is, in the above verses, is physical death. Now let me scroll down here. Now here's Don. He won't answer directly, and he hates it when people won't answer him directly. He knows he admitted something that he shouldn't have admitted 2 years ago. He says here, in sleep in verse 51, where Paul used, we will not all sleep, is likewise death, meaning the resurrection that the resurrection, no matter how we define it, was to be in the generation of the first century. So he completely sidesteps what I asked him, the connection of asleep, which he admits in verse 20, to verse 26. And let's see my full response here. As I'm working on a series right now, part 2's coming out, concerning Don in Galatians 3, how Don says Galatians 3 is not personal faith. It's some sort of corporate faith that was realized in 80-70. I say, Don K. Preston, so physical death was abolished in the first century. I love you, Don, but you have admitted again that Paul is speaking of physical death in 1 Corinthians 15. Also, I'm slowly working on a response to your understanding that faith in Galatians 3:23 and following is not personal faith, but some corporate faith. We'll begin with the first section of verse 5 and 5 through 1. Now, this comes from Don's book, AD-70, A Real Shadow of the End, and I put the quotes in the first video of that. So right here, we're going to focus in on here, and we're going to scroll down to what he said today. But look what he says. We will not all sleep as likewise death, meaning that the resurrection, no matter how we define it, was to be in that generation. In other words, Don's saying no matter how we define death, in other words, he's a little leery of admitting that it's physical death. You can still see that here. No matter what death, but he won't admit. And Don hates this when people do this to him. He hates it. And he says, no, I have not admitted what you think I have. Paul is emphatic on the timing. We will not all sleep. Again, he sidesteps the issue completely. You can see, I'm not going to read it all, but you can see the full quote from Don. There, and I put the original video up there. I have a snapshot. Then there's a snapshot at the beginning of the video. And I put sin was dealt with at Calvary. Again, if 1 Corinthians 15:20, asleep, it says physical death, as you admitted, then why does Paul supposedly, I meant to put do, a switcheroo and speak of another death to be defeated in verse 26? And here's more heresy from Don, this anti-gospel, a cursed gospel, and we'll be getting into that when we get into Galatians 3, 1 through 5. Sin would be dealt with at the parousia. You see that? Sin will be dealt with at the parousia, aka AD-70. 1 Corinthians 15:55 through 56. The resurrection would be when sin, the sting of death, was dealt with. The cross was the initiation of the redemption process, but not the consummation. Got some other Facebook business. What Don fails to realize when he quotes verse 56 of 1 Corinthians 15, the strength of sin is the law, he forgets to quote verse 57 where Paul says, but I have the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. In other words, he already died to the law. Christ fulfilled the law for him. Of course, he misses verse 57 there. And Don K. Preston, you once again are sidestepping your past admissions. Also, if the law is removed, how can one, quote-unquote, die to the law, Romans 7:4, Galatians 2:19 through 21, and receive justification? Oh, that's right. Faith and justification aren't personal, but corporate. Talk later. Have a good one. Let's see if we have anything more on this page. No. And here's where I posted part 1. And let's see some of the comments. It's Don, Michael Eckerson, Don. Yeah, Don screwed up. Then you have Mark Glenn, who pretty much plagiarizes his Uncle Don verbatim. Here's Don. Here's his response. We shall not all sleep. We shall not all sleep. Spoken to first century saints to promise that generation would not all die before the parousia. And then he quotes Matthew 16:27 through 28. And he says they're parallel texts, which I'm not mistaken you apply to AD 70. Is that correct? See, Don is given red herrings. He wants to get me off track and not deal with the fact that he admits physical death is found in 1 Corinthians 15, especially verse 20. But I, of course, would have none of it. I'm not going to answer anything from Don until he answers. This is kind of a lengthy post I did here. Let me see here. Don K. Preston, simply and clearly for everyone, admit as you have done in the screenshot above that 1 Corinthians 15:20 is physical death, and why, quote unquote, the last enemy to be destroyed is death, verse 26, is a different death than verse 20 through 23. Please do not sidestep this, as everyone is waiting for a clear answer without you throwing a change up to run into verse 51. Also, please explain the break between verse 20, which you have already admitted is physical death, and verse 26, the last enemy to be destroyed is death. If we follow verse 20 through verse 26, we see an unbroken thought. The dead, verse 21, would be verse 20 through 28 is one section. Also in verse 20, it speaks of Christ rising from, quote, the dead, the first fruits of those who are asleep. So again, please simply and clearly for everyone admit that 1 Corinthians 15:20 is physical death, and why the last enemy to be destroyed, verse 26, is a different death than verse 20 through 23. Please do not sidestep this, as everyone is waiting for a clear answer without you throwing a change up by running to verse 51. Looking forward to your answer. Here Don gives, and Don again sidesteps. My position is that the death itself is not the last enemy per se. Sin was the problem, so sin wasn't dealt with at the cross. He didn't purge our sins and sit down at the right hand, Hebrews 1:3. He was not that propitiation which appeased God's wrath on our behalf. Yes, sin would be dealt with in AD 70. Atonement is dealt with in AD 70. Justification is a process in AD 70. Not personal justification, not personal application of the atonement, but a corporate mystical understanding. But you can see Don rambling here. He's going to verse 51 again and Matthew 16, but he won't directly answer my question on verse 20. Again, you refuse to reaffirm what you did in the past in the above snapshot. Number 1, is 1 Corinthians 15, verse 20, physical death? Point number 2, if verse 20 is as you have previously admitted, why isn't the last enemy, death, destroyed? Verse 26, physical death. And then there's some more dialogue, but that's pretty much it, guys. Sorry, it's kind of shaky. Just trying to hold this up and scroll, but we can see clearly that Dawn is on the run. Reminds me of that Wings song, Paul McCartney and Wings, Band on the Run, Dawn on the Run. He will not touch, as we can see documented right in front of us. The last 2 days, he would not admit at all a sleep. It says physical death. And he even admitted in one of the first posts I pointed out to you guys that whatever death is in 1 Corinthians 15. In other words, he's leaving the door open, but he won't fully admit it. So Dawn is dishonest Dawn. Dishonest Dawn. Dodge, duck, dishonest Dawn. He's dodging, he's ducking, he's doing whatever it takes. Look around. Studying a couple things at the moment. 1 Corinthians 15, Galatians 3. Studying a few things at the moment. Lutheran dogmatics. So we do have a lot on the go here. Galatians 3, 1 Corinthians 15, Isaiah 24 through 27, Isaiah's apocalypse, Lutheran dogmatics on Christology. Quite a bit on the go, but we're going to continue to pound away on Dawn, on the things that I strongly disagree with, an accursed gospel. But this is part 2, and this will probably be the last part of this series, as I'm working on Galatians chapter 3, responding to Dawn there, where Dawn says Galatians 3 is not personal faith. It's not individual faith. We're not individually justified. We're not individually received the atonement of Christ, which comes from his book AD 70, A Shadow of the Real End, page 69 in another page. But check out that video, as I'll put it in the description, as we're working on part 2 now, and it should be released tomorrow, as we're going section by section through Galatians. Tomorrow we'll have typed out and on video verses 1 through 5.